did nothing wrong, salamanders are good guys actually, and of course, Tau bad. These are all Warhammer takes that we've all heard so often that they've started to become what Warhammer takes should never be, and that is a little bit boring. But I'm a gal who loves Warhammer, spicy opinions, and not being bored, I guess. So recently I took to the internet to ask all of you lovely denizens of online Warhammer spaces to share with me your 40k, Age of Sigmar, painting lore, and general Warhammer related hot takes, secret feelings, and unpopular opinions. And oh boy, did you guys come through on this one, because as soon as I posted my little image asking for your hot takes with a cute little space marine just to seal the deal, I ended up receiving over 2,000 of your unpopular Warhammer takes and opinions. And yes, for the last couple of days, I've busied myself reading every single one of them. And now I have Warhammer brain rot, which is great, thanks for that. So in this video, I'm going to share with you some of the most common, most interesting, and of course, the most spicy takes that I received. Partially because I just kinda wanna, and I thought it would be funny, but more importantly, because some of you guys have such weird Warhammer opinions that I feel that they just need to be heard in order to be believed. Whoosh. Let's go. This video is gonna work is that I am gonna rate your hot takes that you sent me both anonymously and publicly on my own personal Scoville scale of spiciness. With takes I think that everyone would agree with and no one's mad about, like Mephiston Red is a pretty good paint and the Emperor maybe isn't the best dad in the galaxy, ranked freezing and cold, and spicier hot takes which I think less people would agree with, such as Erebus is alright actually, and I quite like the symbol being on the 1, ranked from mild to hot, and in the most extreme cases, fuego. But before we get started, I want to make something super clear because I have rampant anxiety and my own YouTube channel, so I can tell you all about it. Yay. I think that in some corners of the internet, these hot take discussions can sometimes get a little bit argumentative and mean-spirited, and I promise you that is not the vibe we are going for today, and none of these spicy little opinions were selected in order to anger or upset anyone, and if they do, I'm genuinely sorry, that was not my intention at all. Promise. I love reading unpopular opinions and hot takes online because I think they're a genuinely good way of finding out what people secretly think about things, and also a great way of hearing some opinions that maybe you've never heard before. But infighting in comment sections and like saying things to purposefully rile people up is slightly less entertaining, especially for me because I like my channel to be a little bit of escapism from the ever-approaching horrors of reality. But saying that, if you do have your own Warhammer hot take or unpopular opinion and you're feeling brave, please feel free to pop it in the comment section below so we can all read it. Just remember that we like to keep things kind, considerate, and friendly in these necks of the wood. Anyways, let's get cracking with our very first hot take, which I've put first because it was actually one of the more common ones that was sent to me. The Horus Heresy should have been kept as a mythology. The book series has been overwritten and has destroyed the mystery and allure of one of the coolest parts of Warhammer lore. Brackets, no hate to the writers. Okay, so yes, this, like I said, was a very common one that got sent to me. I think at least 20 people had this sentiment, and a few like similar ones to this, so I'm kind of gonna lump them all together here. But yes, I do think that this hot take is pretty hot. I personally really like the Horus Heresy book series, but as someone who also loves mythologies, mysteries, and Lovecraftian themes of some things just being beyond our comprehension, I can also definitely see why this opinion would have some traction. At the end of the day, the Horus Heresy, as in the bare bones of it all, is a story about gods and angels, which are kind of beyond the understanding of us, the reader, as mere mortals. This way of framing the Emperor, the Primarchs, and Space Marines, I think makes them feel more important, and definitely makes them feel as epic and incredible and mysterious as I think they're supposed to feel. So I can definitely see how this was a more common hot take. But I really like the Horus Heresy. I like hearing what Primarchs have to say, and I even like those small glimpses we get into the mind of the Emperor when he's being a real weirdo. I think that's really interesting, and I know that a lot of people like the Horus Heresy book series, so I still think that this is a hot take. But that brings us neatly onto our next take, which is Warhammer 40k would be cooler and more interesting if they got rid of Space Marines. Yes, now this is one I definitely wanted to put in a video because I do think it is quite hot. Very hot, maybe. So I unironically really like Space Marines. I think they're a great part of the 40k lore. I think they're really cool. I even don't hate Primaris Marines, and I'm a proud and unironic enjoyer of Space Wolves. But I have spent enough time on the internet to know that not everyone feels the same way. To try and put on my Space Marines are bad hat for a minute, I think that most people when they say stuff like this don't necessarily hate Space Marines, they're just sick of them being the focal point of absolutely everything in 40k. It's like every starter box has to be Space Marines. Most games that come out are about Space Marines, the books are mostly Space Marines, and every single week we are just getting more and more Space Marines. And trust me, I totally get it because I love 40k and I understand that there is so much more to the lore and the setting outside of just Space Marines, and maybe if the pumped up jocks just kind of scooted over for a little bit, then everyone else would have the opportunity to see that and enjoy everything else that was there. So whilst I definitely think that there is value in that argument, and I even think that the concept of Space Marines disappearing from 40k would be really interesting to explore setting-wise, I really like Space Marines and I would be sad to see them go away, but maybe if they could just sit down and be humble, that would be great. Citadel pots are great. People just don't keep the lids tidy. Oh good, our very first Fuego. I'm not doing that, I hate that, that's weird. Citadel pots bad, dropper bottles good has been a hobby zeitgeist for longer even than Thin Your Paints, because I think most people are sick of spending their hard-earned money on a pot of paint only for it to become a solid mass of colourful junk overnight. But is this just a skill issue? Well, whilst I definitely consider this take to be spicy, I actually don't fully disagree with it. Don't hurt me now. Don't hurt me. I do think that if you have to wipe down a paint pot lid with tissue paper every time you use it, and you end up wasting product in the process of doing so, that's not good because dropper bottles kind of don't really have that issue. And I do wish that there was a better way of getting paint out the pot, which didn't involve me having to either stick my brush in there or reach for an entirely different tool to do that job for me. But whilst I do think that dropper bottles are superior, I honestly don't hate using Citadel pots. I've used them for years and I've never felt inclined to stop buying them or to spend my hard-earned time decanting them into dropper balls. But I do think that most people are gonna disagree with me here, so I accept that I'm probably wrong and this is still a Fuego take. Games Workshop should pay their staff a fair wage, / Games Workshop should credit their artists. Cold. Freezing, in fact. If the bare minimum was a temperature, it would be that. Non-metallic metallics don't look good. I'm actually gonna rate this one mild because whilst I don't agree with it, for as long as I've seen people doing non-metallics, I've seen people being like, I don't think this looks good, or I bet this only works from one angle, and I think that this one is straight up a matter of personal opinion. I personally really love them, and I think they look super cool and help make an entire miniature look consistently painterly, whilst demonstrating some impressive understanding of light and shadow. But I know a bunch of you think they look gash and think that true metallics are the superior way of painting. But truthfully, I can't paint either of them, so I'm afraid the jury's out on this one. Forget Age of Sigmar, RASCALTOWN is the best miniature range. Stone cold, sub-zero, freezing take there, my guy. But also, thank you for saying so, because I can segue into saying you can also get your superior goblin miniatures now at roguehobbies.com. Thank you, I appreciate you. Sub-assemblies for painting are a waste of time. So I think this is a hot-ish take, but I do think it has the potential to be colder because I do think they're onto something here. A very talented painter friend of mine one time told me something that kind of changed the way I look at all my sub-assemblies, and that is, if you can't see it when it's assembled, then you don't need to paint it. And honestly, I kind of get it. It does make perfect sense, and it does save time, so to an extent, I've sort of implemented this in my own sub-assemblies, and I definitely do less now than I used to, but I still do sub-assemblies because I like them and they make me feel safe and secure. Warhammer is not a hobby. So when I heard this one, I was instantly like, ha! Fuego, and you have personally offended me. How dare you? But instead of just instantly like popping off, I asked the guy to provide a little bit more context about what he means, and I kind of get what he's saying. Now, don't be mad at me because I was mad too, so don't be mad at me, just hear me out here. Basically, his point was that calling the hobby Warhammer is like calling running Nike, or I guess like swimming Speedos, because Warhammer is the brand, not the hobby. What we're actually doing is painting miniatures and playing a tabletop war game, and that's the hobby, not necessarily Warhammer. But I still think that this is quite a hot take, and it definitely gets a reaction out of people, but for convenience, I think I'm still gonna call Warhammer a hobby, and also because I don't want to sound like a contrarian, and because I don't really pick up a miniature from another company and paint it and call it doing Warhammer, I think I'm okay to do so. But yes, good food for thought there, and I am glad I asked for an explanation on that one. Age of Sigmar is better than 40k. Hot take. So I haven't actually played either game in long enough to kind of join in with people saying that 40k is too complicated or Age of Sigmar was better when it had less rules, but X game is better than Y is always going to be a hot take for a large group of people who love that game. Age of Sigmar miniatures are better than 40k miniatures. Now, this is one that I'd usually say is mild because of course it's a matter of personal taste, but I'm actually gonna say that this one is cold. Since recently I've been more focused on just painting cool minis and not necessarily playing games so much, I found myself being way more excited about the releases coming out of Age of Sigmar than I have 40k. And whilst I don't really know why yet, because I've not like dug that far into my own psyche, I know for a fact that this sentiment is not an uncommon one in the Warhammer community right now, so I would say it's quite spicy to say, but not necessarily wrong, in my opinion. Warhammer isn't that expensive, / Warhammer is actually good value for money. Oh goody, another steaming hot fuego take. I think that unless you're in quite a good financial position where you don't really need to worry too much about money, that we can all agree that Warhammer is quite expensive. And not to bring Gundam into it again, but for a similar feeling product, which is a fraction of the price, it does make Warhammer feel a little bit more expensive than maybe it could be. However, value for money I think can be a little bit more subjective. When I buy a £26 miniature, I spend ages painting it and I genuinely enjoy that process, and then I have a painted miniature which I can keep forever. And if I played games with that miniature too, then that's even more value added. And as someone who collects miniatures, toys, and weird electronic musical instruments, I've probably spent my hard-earned money on much more useless stuff, which yes is probably overpriced as hell, and yeah, I'm probably dumb for doing it, but I love them all very, very much. So value for money I think is kind of mild because it does depend on how much you're getting out of it, but I think that Warhammer not being expensive at all is quite a spicy take for your average Warhammer fan. 95% of Warhammer jokes and memes are unfunny and overused. Every time someone calls Ultramarine Smurfs, I lose a year off my life. So this one I personally think is quite mild, but I actually don't line up with it 100%. So yes, for us oldies who have been into Warhammer for like over a decade or so, hearing things like Magnus did nothing wrong and Mashovel and Ultramarines are Smurfs lol can get a little bit grating when you've heard it 500 times both online and in your local gaming store. Like, I get it, I'm with you. It's a lot. But I don't know, just let people have their silly little memes and jokes. I mean, it may be the kid that's saying it's first time hearing it and he thinks it's super funny, and we were all once that cringy kid in our locals who were like, haha, nuns with guns, lol. So if it's not hurting anyone, I say let him rip. Also, I still unironically laugh every time I see the drive them closer so I can hit them with my sword meme. I think that's really funny. But speaking of Warhammer memes, the space commie Tau joke did irreversible damage to the fandom, / the Tau bad jokes from 7th edition are outdated, mean-spirited, and put people off playing a totally cool and normal army. I actually think that this is a very cold take, bordering on freezing maybe, because yeah, I really like Tau and I definitely don't think they deserve the hate that they get at all. When I started seriously getting into Warhammer at the beginning of 7th edition, Tau were like the big bad extremely good army who were known for not being much fun to play against due to their impossibly tough battlesuits, especially from Forge World, and their sit at the back of the board and shoot everything you own tactics. But that was a really long time ago now, and as far as I know, they don't really play like that anymore. But I think that nowadays especially, Tau are genuinely a really cool army with awesome miniatures, great lore, and loads of potential, but I still see people kind of like making fun of Tau players, and I think that's a bit of a shame. So stop it, Tau shamers, you're scaring the homies away. Stop it. 40k needs more comedy, like straight up silly and immersion breaking characters, events, and weapons. Cold, I think. 40k is a ridiculous setting, and I think if they inserted a little bit more Monty Python style grim dark humor here and there, that would be really funny and would probably add to the sort of ridiculous over-the-topness of the Warhammer 40k universe in general. When stuff like this already happens in 40k, everyone seems to love it already. For example, things like orcs, funny Necron adventures, Mechanicus robots being hilariously robotic, and when Nurglings throw poop from the rafters of ships. So I don't think there would be any problem with there being more of that at all. In fact, I would quite like to see it myself. Warhammer miniatures have become too detailed. It's slowing down people wanting to paint up armies and is probably having an adverse effect on the company's growth. So cold to mild take here, I think, because I think that for as many people as you'll hear saying that they think Warhammer is too detailed now, you'll find as many people saying that they like how detailed it's become. However, I can't really help but feel a little bit bad for army painters these days when I see kits like Blissbarb Archers or Sisters of Battle, where every single figure in the infantry boxes looks like a main character mini, which is just dripping in glorious detail. Like, it's kind of cool to see, and I love that they're becoming that detailed because it's kind of awesome, but RIP to people who were hoping to paint their armies by next month. It makes it a little bit more difficult. I feel guilty for saying this, but the best games and miniatures right now are coming out of the Specialist Design Studio and not the main Warhammer studio. They just have more soul. Another coldie, I think, but please bear in mind here that I am heavily biased. In my opinion, when I compare the miniatures that have been coming out of Necromunda for 40k and the ones which have been coming out of the main studio for 40k, I tend to be a little bit more excited for the Necromunda ones, if I'm being very honest. I prefer the direction that their Votann went. The gangers are always just so cool, and they have a real zest for extremely characterful single miniatures too, which I love. So yes, I think that this is a cold take, but maybe mild at best. Playing games with unpainted miniatures is unacceptable. So I would absolutely rate this one 100% fuego, but I'm worried that quite a lot of people would actually agree with this, so I'm gonna knock it down to hot for now, but try and explain why it should absolutely be a fuego take. In an ideal world, I agree that the best way to play Warhammer would always be against beautifully thematically painted armies, and that both players could enjoy a really immersive game together. And realistically, maybe it would also be nice if you could at least play against a painted army. But I do think we have to make allowances and be understanding that people in the hobby can be quite time poor, and they're also just trying to have a nice time. As I'm sure you all know, painting an army takes such a long time, and if my friend who works a 9 to 5 and has 2 kids wants to try out her unpainted orc army for a bit of fun, then I'm not going to tell her no just because she hasn't spent another 200 hours painting them up. And then if I was to tell her that if she was to play a game with her orcs, that would be unacceptable, I feel like that's a bit of a fun policey douchebag move on my part, and I think it's really easy to just see a case-to-case basis and make allowances for people's lives. Like, that shouldn't be too hard. Of course, as far as playing games with painted miniatures goes, places like tournament events or even some local gaming stores may have some different rules, and that's kind of okay, but on a person-to-person basis, I would never tell my friend who was just trying to have fun with their miniatures that they were being unacceptable. I just wouldn't do that. I think that would be mean. And because I've already gone on for way too long, we are gonna end the video here with my favorite ice-cold take of all, which is that there is no single correct way to enjoy Warhammer. I hope that instead of angering you against your fellow Warhammer fan, this video has just proven that even though we all love the same thing, we all approach it from different angles and subsequently get different things out of it, which is totally fine. I long for a world in which the grimdark Black Templar player shakes hands with the silly little guy enjoyer across the table, and they both go home to take part in their polar opposite ways of enjoying Warhammer with a mutual respect for the way the other person chooses to have their own fun. And even if you've been into the hobby for 10 years or 10 days, we all end up kind of sticking around because no matter how you choose to enjoy it, doing Warhammer is pretty cool. And I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. As usual, thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for being rogues. I will see you in the next one.